houses, because we don't like to ask everybody to go to the great work of developing the RFP and the pricing information. And after all of that process ensued, the highest ranked proposer, considering both the qualifications and the RFQ technical score, as it were, the RFP technical score, and the price was Skanska with a maximum number of points, and also the lowest price. So the Skanska price was 3% less than the independent cost estimate, which is well within our budget for the garage. Allows also the election of some alternates, which include some green technology adds to the garage, and that will be those will actually be exercised at no price to us under the Skanska proposal. And finally, I would just note that there will still be a design process associated with the design-build process. So one of the things we hope to do is continue to mold the project so that it is well regarded and well received by the neighborhood and those around it. We're not done with that process. We're really starting in on a much more detailed phase where we can actually begin to look at those trade-offs in a very much more scientific way. The recommended award here is for the contract amount plus about a $950,000 change order allowance, as noted, between design and permitting risk at about 3% and construction risk at about 5%. Total authorization requested from the board is $13,150,000. Skanska estimates that will obtain 22% of contract value in the disadvantaged business, and has in its program in the past been very successful with us. And it also has the firm has a long history of mentoring and recent successes related to diversity within its own workforce. And it's also noted that Dr. Belton and I were at this award banquet. Skanska was recently named Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs Contractor of the Year for 2012. But all in all, we had excellent participation. We're choosing from an excellent slate of contractors, and we followed the process very methodically and very methodical and transparent way. And based on that outcome, I recommend that award the contract to Skanska. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
So does the board have any questions on this?
Just for some clarity, Mr. General Manager, on the second page of this resolution, where it talks about the add alternatives 1 and 2, the electrical charging stations and the roof photo, whatever the rest of that word says. It's one of the big fancy words, you know.
Solar panels.
The solar panels is probably what it means, I don't know. But in terms of wanting to know, because of the electrical vehicles, and we're seeing in many different places, including grocery stores, that you have the charging stations. When it says here that we can add this without no additional cost to the contract price, a little bit more information on that, and what is the likelihood that we will take this alternative, because I'm sure the electrical charging is going to be a necessity for that garage.
Well, on your latter question, the likelihood is 100%, because and what we were looking at is when you enter into these procurements, you first have no idea where the final price is going to be. So we always like to leave ourselves a little room to adjust if the prices come in high. And in that case, these options, if you will consider. Maybe we could put off the electrical charging for a period of time with a photovoltaic roof for a period of time. But what the pricing demonstrated to us is that we do have the capacity right now to do that, and to, really, if you will, pull a trigger on those two additional options at the initial award, and that would be our intent right now. So all the reason for breaking into the pieces was just to give us that flexibility in the case that the prices came out high. But we agree with you that the charging stations are going to become much more important in the future, and we're really looking forward to using the Portland Milwaukee project to demonstrate how to integrate those into our parking supply, and begin to also develop some cost history on that as well. With that, answered your question.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Quick question in regards to just the pricing. I mean, Our independent cost estimate came in at roughly 12.5 million, a little over that. Skanska came in at 12.2, and Hoffman came in at 13.7. You know, as you look at that, sometimes when you see the price differences being that significant, sometimes you ask the question, did they leave something out? How confident does our team feel in regards to making sure that, I mean, Skanska is a big company, making sure that they got everything included, and we're not going to see some change order in very short order once the project gets started?
I've asked that very same question, and I've been assured that they actually have a very complete proposal, a very complete bid, and asked our project manager to look them in the eye and say, this is really it. And so, again, we have a very good history working with Skanska. They've not, for example, they did the Rockwood station with us. So we have great confidence that the price is a good price.
I guess I just make a comment is I'm just really pleased with the competition. The number of folks who participated, you couldn't have gone wrong with any of the top three that were under consideration. I think the most important thing to me is we learned from the Sunset Parking Garage that we actually want to have the ability to add additional floors of parking if necessary. And so thank you for doing that. Very much appreciated. So if there's no further questions then, do we have a motion to approve resolution 1305-37?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 13-05-37 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the item which I see there's a number of folks here who wish to talk on, which is resolution 13-05-38, which is a resolution for adopting the fiscal year 2013-2014 annual budget, appropriating funds and changing its basis of accounting. And I had 14 before. Now how many do I have? About 19 folks who have signed up to testify on this particular issue. So what I'm going to do is ask the general manager to give the comments, and I think what we'll do is have the public comments first, then we'll get into questions. Does that sound okay to that? Okay, good.
Please, Mr. President, stress the 3-minute mark on this board, since we have
You bet.
19.
You'll help me on that one too?
I'll help you on that.
All right.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, again, I'd like to have Dave come up and help us through this, but I did want to just provide a few highlights of this fiscal year 14 budget. This, as I sort of noted from the outset, this is a budget that allows us to fix what we have, pay what we owe, and it's good for riders. It provides fiscal stability, and it provides improved service reliability, and indeed improved service. Highlights of the budget include adding $2.1 million in bus service fixes, and it begins to implement and follow the recommendations of the West Side Service Enhancement Plan that we just concluded in Washington County. It accelerates bus replacement. 70 new buses are coming beginning this month through the fall, and it will be added to that another 60 buses from this budget as proposed to be delivered next spring. I mentioned earlier, associated with contract actions, the State of Good Repair, which is again a program to begin to improve the reliability and focus on the reliability of the rail system, and allows us to begin to make some of those investments in rehabilitation, not just maintenance. There is no fare increase associated with this budget. We continue the low-income fare mitigation program. The Portland-Milwaukee project is funded, no new general fund dollars this year. One other item that I just wanted to note that we haven't really talked about in public session prior is related to operator break in restrooms. We certainly recognize the need for safe restrooms and that we have some locations right now that simply don't measure up. The recent safety incident in Southeast Portland indicated that to us. You should know that we do have an ongoing program to improve these facilities over a period of time, but with this recent issue, I recognize the need to accelerate this program. So within existing and current resources, we will reallocate as few elements of our capital program to do just that. So, for example, we do include in this budget new restrooms, permanent restrooms that will be constructed at Milwaukee Transit Center and at Flavelle and 92nd. You should know right away that on June 2nd, the Decom Triangle layover will be moved to 2 alternate locations, so we'll be fully out of the Decom Triangle area with a new sign up. But we continue to focus on finding a permanent location off-site that would be available for lines 8 and 17 in that area, and so the budget allows us to advance that program as well. And then for those areas where we have actually, I think there are just 4 portables remaining or thereabouts, and what we will do in the short term is improve the fencing, security, and lighting around those so that they are actually a much safer area, but they are on a long-term program that we will advance as quickly as we can to actually create permanent facilities. As you well know, not everything can be done at once, but we do want to advance this as quickly as we can because we know how important it is. And we have been on that program for a while. Also just wanted to note that related to public outreach, if I wanted to summarize what I've heard from our riders and our customers, is everybody wants more and better service. Since February, TriMet staff and I have been actively engaged in a number of public outreach meetings. We started with the General Manager Budget Task Force, which I reported to you earlier. But our philosophy this year has really been to go out and meet people where they are in the counties, convention centers, in many stakeholder meetings, and meeting separately with different groups. We have met, as our calculations tell us now, 1,900 different stakeholders associated with this, and 150 different venues around the region. So this has been another good effort to try to reach out and hear from our riders and customers. We've also been able to meet with a number of business organizations, social service providers, schools, and other our jurisdictional partners, which are always part of our outreach effort. We add in the email and social networking, the numbers go to about 41,000. But some specific topics we have talked about, and I think deserve a little special mention at the outset, is one is that our commitment to review the transfer policy. We are using updated data to analyze the transfer issues, any pricing changes associated with cost differences associated with it, how the impacts, how those impact translate to different segments of our community, and we promise to provide that information to our community partners as well as the board by the end of June. We would begin to have work sessions and conversations with those in July, and we will report back to your board meeting in July for your consideration about any change. I just also note that that's being facilitated, if you will, by our gradual implementation of the ticket printers on buses. We did do a pilot earlier this year, and the permanent installation of that is beginning very shortly. It will be turned on garage by garage, all to be completed by July 1. Those printers will allow the flexibility, if you will, to make some adjustments in the transfer policy that will be subject to your consideration. I'd also note that the Portland Public School Youth Pass has continued for 1 more year with a partnership with the City of Portland and Portland Public Schools. But also comes with a commitment to look at the sustainability of that program and the equity of that program over the long haul. And we'll begin that very shortly with our partners, and also need to begin to invent the process whereby we make sure we circle back with the stakeholders on that in many different venues. I also would just note that we are still, as you well know, underway with union contract negotiations, or hope to be underway with union contract negotiations. The status of the ERB appeal of last July's arbitration decision is really critical for our ability to maintain the kinds of improvements we see in this budget moving forward. With that, I would also note that we have also committed to review non-union compensation. We'll be doing a process that looks at total compensation, recognizing that we have some very different benefit tiers related to our non-union employees that need to be considered along with salary. And we will look to bring that back publicly in these sorts of sessions for your discussion and your evaluation. I will tell you what I've told our employees is nothing's going to happen before January, so my expectation by this fall we will begin that conversation publicly with you and with other stakeholders. With that, I'd like to turn to Dave, who has some, wanted to just review, I think, a few updates associated with his budget, since you passed all the formal documents in the formal business meeting.
So I did want to start with the updated forecast that Board Member At the May 8th board briefing, Board Member Prosser asked for an updated forecast based on the changes that we're proposing in the final version of the FY14 budget. We have done that, and we did provide that in detail to Board Member Prosser. But the outcome of that forecast, just to hit the highlights, is that it really did not make any major changes in the long-term forecast. It has a small impact in FY14 and FY15, but longer term, there was very little change. The forecast does continue to show that we, based on the July 12th arbitration decision, have about 4 to 5 years of financial stability, but over time, the growth in medical benefit costs and the increased number of retirees does grow significantly faster than the growth in payroll tax, and continues to show that imbalance in out years. I did want to highlight the major changes in the forecast that for the FY14 budget. First, in the payroll tax, that's the largest change that we're proposing, and based on an updated Eco Northwest forecast. This is the same information that we shared with you on May 8th at that public briefing, but they've lowered their growth rate assumption for FY14 from 8.7 to 6.8%, a reduction of about 1.9%. The largest components of that reduction are based on their CPI assumption, which they've now lowered from 3.8% growth in CPI next year to 2.4%. And the balance of the adjustment is a slower employment growth than they had initially forecasted, moving from 3.4 to 2.8%. In total, tax revenue, including self-employment, state and local now are forecasted to be about $6 million less than we had forecasted for FY14 in the initial version of the budget. The fair revenue assumption stays the same. It's a ridership growth of 3.3% with over a 5% growth in revenue due to the full year implementation of the September 12 fare increases, and that operating grants, our third largest revenue source, the assumption stays the same, that MAP 21 is fully funded. I wanted to speak to three major expense categories briefly. First is pension funding. In FY13, we had, at the beginning of the year, we had an unfunded actuarial accrued liability of $304 million. In this current year, we're funding $12 million of normal costs. That's the cost of benefits that are earned during this year. That's being funded. And we're funding an additional $30 million towards paying down the unfunded liability. In FY14, the budget assumes again, and we will pay the $12 million of normal costs again, but we've increased the contribution to paying down the unfunded liability from $30 to $37 million. This increase in pension funding is significant. It should, based on even using more conservative actuarial assumptions than we currently use, using a 7% assumed rate of return. There's obviously a lot of moving parts with this, but that we should be fully funded in approximately 15 years. Concerning OPEB liability, the other post-employment benefits is primarily medical benefits. We just this week or last week received an updated actuarial evaluation that takes into account the July 12th arbitration decision, that reduced or replaced the region's $5 copay insurance plan with the 90/10 plan that's in place right now. That change reduced our OPEB liability from $901 million to $852 million. So, given the size of the OPEB liability, reducing the liability, the focus needs to be going forward that we continue to reduce the liability by reducing our cost of benefits and bringing the pay-go obligation down to a sustainable level. If we were to try to fund fully fund that OPEB liability, it would have a devastating impact on riders, both in service reduction and fare increases. The third component I wanted to speak to on the expenditure side was diesel fuel. This is one that Dr. Bethel had discussed on May 8th. We are lowering our diesel fuel budget assumption from $3.40 to $3.30 a gallon, which reduces our total expenditures for next year by about $600,000. As Dr. Bethel correctly pointed out on the 8th, one of the reasons we can take a more aggressive assumption related to diesel fuel is that we have incurred savings in diesel fuel of about $2.1 million over the past 2 fiscal years, and that those savings are available to be drawn on if we need to, if diesel fuel costs are higher. So we've changed the language in the budget resolution to reflect that concept. So finally, I just wanted to highlight how all this impacts fund balance, and particularly relative to the board's policy about fund balance. In the approved version of the budget, we had $107 million of unrestricted ending fund balance. And in this final version, that's reduced to 102.5. Stating this in months of operating expenses, as the policy does, we're going from 2.62 months of operating expenses to 2.52 months of operating expenses. That would be the ending fund balance at the end of FY14. We believe this change still makes sense, that we have an appropriate balance between continuing revenues and continuing expenses. At this point in the FY14 budget, we have $510 million of operating resources and $489 million of operating expenses. So there we've got a $21 million operating revenues in excess of operating expenses. The balance of those savings and some of the draw on working capital is going to fund a significant increase in capital expenditures for FY14, including significant bus replacement in FY14. Two final points to consider on fund balance. An ending fund balance assumes every dollar that's appropriated is spent. Historically, we underspend appropriations on the operating side by about 1 to 2%. And ending fund balance also assumes that every dollar of contingency is spent. And so that this year we have $14.7 million in contingency. There are no earmarks for that contingency at this point, but it would be available then as additional things come up during the fiscal year. That are my comments.
Would you like to have some questions now, or wait till we go through the public hearing and have Dave come back up? Okay, let's get right into the public hearing then, all right? So as I said, we have 19 people that are signed up for this item. We all want to hear from all of you, but as you also heard, 19 folks, so we're going to limit testimony to 3 minutes. We do have a timer. You are give us the lesson real quickly on the timer.
At 30 seconds, the green light will be, you'll get a sort of yield yellow, and then for about 30 seconds, 25 seconds, and then when it's red, you're done.
When it's red, I'm going to remind you to wrap up your testimony quickly. If not, hopefully I'll call on the next person to testify. All right. So with that, I'm going to call you up 2 at a time. The first 2 are Osco Solorio,
and Vivian Satterfield.
Oscar, please go ahead. I assume you're Oscar.
I am Oscar. Pretty close, Solorio. Solorio. Hi, my name is Oscar Solorio, Purchasing Manager for Central City Concern in downtown Portland. I'm in charge of procuring the reduced fares for TriMet through the Low Income Mitigation Program. Central City Concern serves single adult and families in Portland metro area who are impacted by homelessness, poverty, and addictions. And since its inception, we have purchased more than $35,000 in discounted fares. Transportation is a critical step to helping adults and families living in poverty. Due to their homeless or very low income status, they often have no other transportation options to get to critical employment appointments, jobs, and/or medical appointments. In addition to purchasing discounted fares, Central City Concern will also receive $22,500 worth of fares through the Access Transit Fare Relief Program. These fares benefit 3 of our most vital programs and are critical to their survival. For patients of the Old Town Clinic, which oversees 20,000 medical visits annually, it's getting to and from appointments to receive compassionate health care when they may not otherwise get care. For clients of the Recuperative Care Program, once their health and situations have been stabilized, it provides stability knowing they can get to and from medical appointments, training, and employment, the resources they need to become self-sufficient. For clients of the Employment Access Center, a one-stop employment resource center, job seekers can attend these classes in resume writing, interviewing, and computer skills, and not have to worry about how they're going to get to an interview or their place of employment. Thank you, TriMet, for creating this program and for its continued funding in the coming budget. I would like to add that our accounting department is a lot happier since the low income mitigation program has been in place. Instead of each department having to purchase fares separately, which resulted in having to cut multiple checks on a monthly basis, I maintain